What I would not try to do is count on the AI to have good taste. And so like automated video editing, I think is a terrible idea. Creating video requires good taste. And so as the human, I'm going to lean into my human ability to have good taste. And not every human has good taste, but it's something you can learn. But I don't think any AI has good taste.
Do you ever like take something that it gives you and then feed it back in and say, this is what you just gave me, like shoot holes in this. What's wrong with this? How would you improve it? What other questions do I need to ask for you to give me a better response? I do that in writing all the time.
And I'll do that against models. So I'll take the Claude output and go over to O1 and be like, I wrote this. It's a lie, but I wrote this. And yeah, I'll do the opposite. I'll take it from O1 back to Claude and tell it I wrote it. And yeah, I do that kind of adversarially sometimes.
It's funny, I'm not a developer, and I've tried to learn to code a few times, and it never really stuck. I kind of went through the whole thing of like, let's try Laravel, and let's try Rails, and let's try Django, and it kind of never really stuck. And like now, I think, I can just code without knowing I can build shit without knowing how to code, right? Is that is that the promise? Do you think
that is the promise? Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That is the promise. I can't speak to whether or not that is the reality. I keep seeing people say on Twitter that you can do that. You don't have to know anything, and you can just hit, tab, and you make a full app. And yet, I feel like I don't see a lot of new apps. I mean, that's the thing that I'm a little bit confused by is all the all the AI talking heads on social media are like, we're not going to have any more developers, and yet it seems like we still need developers. And so I'm a little skeptical on like, I don't need to know anything. AI is going to do everything, at least at this point in time. But I do think AI is incredibly valuable, and it would be silly as a developer or even slightly technical person. I think it would be silly to not use it at all.
Yeah. So I think it's helpful in these kind of conversations to qualify your perspective a little bit, like frame your perspective, because there's idiots like me who are like, I can just use Replit and build shit, and there's like quite senior developers who I think when they talk about AI, their perspective should be quite different, and there's mid-level and junior. Like, where would you say you fit on there as we're kind of like sharing your perspective?
Yeah, I would say I'm a pretty senior developer. I've been a developer for a long time. I guess professionally, maybe 15 years, and beyond that, I'm one of those that started when I was like 12, 13. So I've been doing this for, 20 years now. And feel pretty qualified all across the stack, front end, back end, basically everything. And so I feel very confident using AI to kind of make me go faster. But I do worry a little bit about junior developers that are coming in cold and kind of just relying on AI to do stuff for them. That makes me a little bit nervous.
Because
I think I think once you get past like a demo app or like a to-do app, there are a lot of architectural decisions that need to be made, right? There's a lot of keeping kind of the structure of the whole app in your head and slotting things in where it should belong, and knowing, what's going to work, what's going to scale up well, and what's going to scale out well, and stuff like that. And I think you can very easily get in a situation, if you're just letting any of these tools write the code for you, I think you can easily get into a situation where it focuses on, one task at hand without consideration to like the broader structure or architecture, future concerns. And then you end up kind of like down a rabbit hole that's really hard to come back out of. And so designing software is different, I think, than just like writing a feature. Designing, not like on the front end, but like designing the software on the back end, or even on like the code of the front end. That's a very important skill to have. And I'm not yet convinced that these AI models have really good and broad architectural design like patterns.
Yeah. So maybe like getting specific to talk about like the tooling and where like it might fit for the right type of person. So I'll just share kind of what I know, because I think I'm sort of representative of a lot of our audience, and then it kind of spans tech from the technical spectrum up to kind of like where you are. I got started with Claude and just talking to Claude and building, command line stuff. That was fine. I have used Replit. I still don't know how to pronounce it. Replit is what I say. Yeah. I don't. Yeah. It is much better at like, I just want this simple thing. We're using it to build some like tools, like free tools, like marketing stuff. That's probably as far as I would expect it to go. And then I am using Cursor a bit to try to build slightly more complicated things. But I don't expect any of these to be able to build Castos. I mean, it's a pretty complicated, product. Do you agree with like kind of like the use case for those? And then like, I'm sure I'm missing a whole bunch of shit. Like I know people on our team use Super Maven. I hear of Windsurfer. Sure. Like what, tell me about like your perspective of like the tech here on February 7th.
Yeah. I think the thing you said there at the end is the most telling. Like it couldn't build Castos. And I am not like a thought leader or anything, so I won't say what it can and can't do in the future. I have no idea. But where we're standing right now, I agree, it can't build like a full SaaS. Like you can't go to it and say, build Castos, build SavvyCal, build whatever. Like it's just not going to work. But I think on the other side, the other extreme of like AI is so stupid, I'm not going to use it is fooling yourself. And so I think where we come down is somewhere in the middle, which is the AI can be incredibly powerful and incredibly productive for discrete tasks. And so the way that I like to use it, so I use it and I'm not like a full on, AI bro that just like never touches my keyboard and just hits accept, next, but I don't want to be a Luddite either. And so the way that I use it is I don't have any models built into my, my IDE. So like in my actual editor, I don't have anything that is like, hey, here's maybe the next 10 lines of code you were about to write. Maybe not, but maybe. That drives me crazy. Because it's wrong 50% of the time. And even that, it's like the other 50% of the time, it narrows down what could have been like, oh, I have this kind of thought. And then it completes something and you're like, oh, yeah, I guess that's good enough. And I just don't like that. And so the way that I work right now is, I work in JetBrains PHP Storm, which is, just my IDE. And I have the machine learning autocomplete on. And so that's all local only, doesn't do a lot of like writing logic for me. It's just kind of like a much better autocomplete. That's as much as I like built into the editor. That being said, I pay for O1 Pro, which is $200 a month. I pay for Claude. I pay for Gemini. Like I pay for all of the tools because they're so useful. And so where that leaves me is when I run into like a discrete problem, I will take some files, some context over to, a lot of times right now it's Claude, and say like, here's what I'm trying to do. Here are the 4, 5, 6 relevant files. And it works best if you say, here's the test that I'm trying to get past. Can you write the implementation for me? And it does that pretty well. It's like 90% of the time it comes back and it totally works. And so then I take that from the Claude interface in the web and put it back in my editor and get back to work. And I like that like kind of like air gapped approach where I can walk over to the machine and say, do this really hard thing. Yeah. Here's like a minuscule amount of context that you need so that you don't get distracted. Because if you distract the models, they go off and you're like, what the hell are you doing? Like I asked you a specific question. And so that's my preferred style right now for like discrete tasks. I also have some for like spiking out new stuff, but we can pause there.
Okay. How how difficult is it, or get limiting, I guess, is it to kind of get that context and to input it? Or are you always kind of like, I know, like I need to reference this function and this model and this other thing, like, or do you think sometimes you struggle with that?
Yeah, in the ways that I've been using it, it's not very much of a struggle. There's a Chrome plugin that allows you to like do file uploads to Claude. So with Claude, you can upload files, but with this plugin, you can upload folders. That's what I meant to say. You can upload folders. Okay. And so like a concrete example is I'm working on this this library. The library is called Fusion, and part of what the library does is it takes a block of PHP that the developer has written, and it goes through a pipeline, like a build step. And so it takes the block of code that the developer has written, and then it turns it into an abstract syntax tree. So it like inspects all the code and turns it into all these tokens, and then it walks through the user's code and makes slight modifications. So this is a really nice, like controlled environment for Claude to operate in, because what I can do is I can say like, here's the user's code before, here's what it should be transformed into. Like once you're done parsing the AST, this is the output. Here's the structure by which we're processing files. So I've written like a class called conformer. And what it does is it conforms the PHP to the right style. And in the conformer, there are, 10 or 15 different little classes that do one or two things at a time. And it just walks through them in like a pipeline. And at the end, you should have something good come out the other side. So I can go to Claude and say like, hey, here's the whole folder of all the conformers that I already have. Here's the before, here's the after. Write me a brand new one that makes what I just showed you work. Right. And it just spits it out. And I take that class and I go paste it into my IDE and I run the tests. And if they turn green, then I go back to the class and I'm like, yeah, this isn't totally my style. Let me like change that, change this, run the test again, still green. Okay, back to work. And so that's a very like scoped down universe of what Claude has to worry about, with a well-defined task of before, after, here's the structure, write something to fill in the gap. And it works like first shot 95% of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So to kind of like go up a level, I guess, you hear from a lot of folks, like we're not hiring developers. Like everyone needs developers. Like we're not hiring new developers. Benioff, I think, it's like, we're not hiring new developers, like until further notice. I feel like that. Like I hear things from our team, like, hey, I'm 30 to 50% more productive right now than I was. What do you... I mean, this is getting a little like esoteric, but like, what do you think that means for like developer jobs and the economy? Yeah. Are we just going to build a lot more shit, or are there going to be fewer developers? If so, like what aspect of that is at jeopardy?
Yeah, I'm torn. So I think the appetite for software is functionally infinite at this point. So I don't think we're like running out of things to build. That's not something I have seen yet. So I don't think that's on the horizon. In terms of, do we need more developers? I have felt this a little bit as I'm working with AI. I do think I am maybe 5, 6, 7, sometimes 10 times as productive using AI as when I'm not. It's a lot. Times. Yes. So like one of these, like writing one of these AST parsers could take me solo. It could take me an entire day, because they're incredibly finicky. It's like enter this node, exit this node, recursive hell, over and over and over, right? And I can get this thing done in literally 5 minutes talking to Claude. And so it's like an order of magnitude faster. So just my experience alone tells me, boy, I'm getting stuff done a lot faster. If I were on like a big team, we would all be getting stuff done a lot faster and we wouldn't need other people. So I do think that there is going to be some downward pressure on hiring, and some, because people are going to be AI enabled. I don't think developers are going to go away. I don't think that I just don't ever see that happening, because at some point, someone has to describe to the computer exactly what you want to happen, and that is called programming. Like describing to the computer what should happen is programming. And so there is, I think, a future where programming looks very different, where you're describing to this intermediate computer, the AI, what you want to happen. But you still have to be pretty good at describing the problem and pretty good at describing the proposed solution for it to get it right. And so I do think there's going to be programmers in some way, shape, or form in the future. My plan for staying relevant and not broke is to see this coming wave that is supposedly going to crush us all and try to harness it and just ride it out. Like, instead of just being crushed and tumbled, I'm going to try to surf it as much as I can. And so that's why even though I like chopping wood down with my bare hands, like, I'm going to learn how to use the chainsaw because I would like to have, some sort of income in the future. And so I feel like there's this certain set of programmers that are like, AI is stupid, I'm never going to use it. And I think that's going to be the first set to go. I think there is another set of programmers that's like, AI is amazing, I'm only going to use it. And I think their potential will be capped. And of course, I'm talking my own book here because it's what I'm doing. I think there's a middle where you continue to be a good AI-enabled programmer that goes 10 times faster than everyone else, and you might just be able to surf that wave out without getting crushed.
Well, and it's everything, right? Like on the marketing side, I sure as hell use, same. I pay for Claude and ChatGPT. I use both of them. I don't know, a third of my day is spent in those tools. And the other third is on Zoom, I think. So it's like, I mean, I use it. So I'm writing a book. I haven't talked about it much. I'm writing a book on sales. And my process was, it's very AI enabled. My process was a lot like you're talking about. I spent about a week working on kind of the premise and the outline and the character development and all this kind of stuff. And then I just fed that into Claude and it wrote the book in about an hour.
Yep.
And it's awesome. Like, it's really, really, really good. Like, it's way better than I could have written. And that's, to me, that's the magic, is like, you take, just like you were describing with your pipeline thing, is like, you take the architecture, you get it right, you show it like what good looks like, and you let it kind of fill in the blanks. I think like, at the same time, it's funny. It's really funny. I am at the same time the most at peace with where Castos is in AI, because I'm like, ain't nobody, like Andrew Wilkinson talks about his businesses being New Zealand, right? Like big enough to be relevant, but not so big that somebody's going to come after you, right? I think we're kind of there. Podcasting generally is kind of there. Sure. It's not, fucking AI. It's not all this kind of stuff. So I think we're in the shadows a little bit. It's also pretty complicated. So I feel at the same time like, hey, geez, knock on wood, we're not a content marketing agency or SEO that's about to get walloped. At the same time, I'm the most stressed I've maybe ever been, because I have these, talking about this wave that's coming, and I'm like, what's going to happen? Like, not what's going to happen to Castos in this business. I think it's pretty secure, but like, what's going to happen to the world? What's going to happen to like all of our 4,000 customers that are paying us money, and all this kind of stuff? Like, I don't know. I mean, this is not a development conversation, but like, I don't know. Are you more or less stressed because of AI?
Yes. I am way more stressed. More stressed.
That's most people, I think.
I've got it way worse than you, because we make our money through education. So like, we make our money by teaching developers how to use databases well, right? And so we've got a course on Postgres, a course on SQLite. Those are our two main sources of income. And if we're saying that like the super intelligence is on the horizon, people aren't going to be like studying very much anymore. Yeah. And so, that freaks me out big time. I think that is short-sighted to say like, I don't need to learn, I just need to ask the AI. But I think that's what people are doing. Like, I think Just watching people who are younger than us, so people maybe in their early 20s, interact with development. They're like, yeah, I don't know anything. I just talk to Cursor all day. And I think that's a terrible idea. I think your career is going to be very painful. However, it is reality that that's what's happening. And so I look at that and I'm like, am I going to try to convince the whole world that like you should continue to watch video courses about how to use databases? Or am I going to do something else that harnesses that AI wave instead of tries to like hold it back? Because I can't hold it back. And so, yeah, it's really scary. Like, we picked the worst time in human history to start an education business on the cusp of, super intelligence. And so we talk about that a lot. We're trying to figure out how to harness it for our business. And we have a few ideas, but it's still like pretty terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. About 8 or 10 months ago, I started doing some coaching, kind of on the side, and it's been really rewarding. And similarly, though, I look and say, like, why would you hire me to be your business coach or your sales coach if you can just go talk to Claude for a while? And I think the answer is like, one, people, right? I think that's the thing that is the big opportunity with all this. And like, if you're looking to do something, it should involve human beings looking each other in the eye, and being in the same room. I think the other thing is that kind of like autocomplete, like misguidance, right? It is, and I see this in most written content, and you see it in a different way in development, is it's not wrong, but it's not like the most right a lot of times too.
Yep.
And I think that's the only limiting factor right now, to be honest, though. Because you could sure as hell take all of my podcast, all of Rob Walling's podcast, all of whoever's podcast, load them into a rag, right? And just talk to it, right? And like you wouldn't need me anymore. I don't know. That'll happen. But it's if that is as good as actually talking to a person or actually taking your course and actually leveling up to be able to get that architect level perspective.
And even in some of the AI work that I'm doing, I have still found it beneficial to read the documentation. Like I'm big on reading documentation for tools that you use. And there was an instance just a few days ago where I was talking to, I think it was O1 Pro, and I was asking it how to do something, and it like lined out this really like complicated, not very like developer experience friendly way to do it using a certain pattern. And I said, wait, hang on, can't we just use a reactive? Because I knew that the Vue.js docs had this concept of a reactive instead of a ref. And I was like, oh, a reactive, that's a great idea. Here's how you could do it with a reactive. And if I had not known that the word reactive was a thing, that it was a concept in Vue.js, that it was shaped similar to what we were talking about, I couldn't have turned around and said like, hey, you gave me this solution that kind of sucks. Did you think about this other thing? And that's one of the things that it's like, I think the most valuable thing that you can do as like a working developer is have a broad understanding of the landscape. Like read the documentation front to back without any pressure on yourself to like remember or understand or like deeply grasp any of it. Just read it all the way through. And then in your head, like what the area of the thing you're working with is. And when you get to a problem that is shaped like some vague thing you read in the documentation, then you can walk over to Claude and be like, hey, I'm having this problem. I remember this was in the docs. Like, is this the right thing? And it can say yes or no, but at least you understand, like you have a map of the area that you're working in. Whereas if you don't ever do that, you're like, you can't see 2 feet in front of your face and you're just kind of like fumbling around in the dark. Yeah. And so you as the human taking a lot of context to Claude and guiding it and saying like, you went down this rabbit hole, try this thing instead. Start over from scratch. Try this approach and see what happens. And you don't have to know what's going to happen, but you have to have enough knowledge to say like, hey, there is another way that you didn't think about.
So I was playing around with Replit last night for like a landing page, and I wanted to have it do something else. And I was like, ooh, this is where I would want to like fork. And I know that's not the right term, a branch maybe. Like I want to take, this is okay. I want to take and go do something over here that I can maybe kill and come back to this thing. And I don't know if it does that. But do you ever like take something that it gives you and then feed it back in and say, this is what you just gave me, like shoot holes in this. What's wrong with this? How would you improve it? What other questions do I need to ask for you to give me a better response? I do that in writing all the time.
And I'll do that against models. So I'll take the Claude output and go over to O1 and be like, I wrote this. It's a lie, but I wrote this. What, is there anything that I could do better? Have I missed any edge cases? That's a great question. Like, hey, what are the things that I'm not considering in this code? And I'll do the opposite. I'll take it from O1 back to Claude and tell it I wrote it. And I do that kind of adversarially sometimes. With Claude, if it does get kind of like wonky, I will copy out the last bit of code that it wrote and just start a new chat and say like, hey, I wrote this, just back to Claude itself, and then see, what it says about, changing it or something like that. But I'll absolutely do that.
So you've talked a lot about like O1 and Claude Sonnet, I guess 3.5. How do you decide when to use which?
Right. So O1 Pro is the big dog, right? So it's the one that is both expensive and also thinks for like several minutes at a time. And so O1 Pro is my guy when I need, like, I got to write 2 paragraphs of what's on my mind and give it as much like, I'm thinking about doing this. Here's the problems. Here's what I've done already. Here's why I think it could work. Here's why I think it couldn't work. What do you got? And then I just let it cook. I go back to work and I come back, 5 minutes later and it's got a page and a half or 2 of ideas. And so that's really, really helpful when I'm like kind of at the beginning and thinking, how do I want to architect this? How do I want to structure this? Or as is the case recently, I'm operating in an unfamiliar environment. So I'm like writing a Vite plugin. I've never written a Vite plugin in my life. And so I walk over to O1 Pro and say, I'm writing a Vite plugin. I've never done that before. Here's exactly what I need it to do. Here are the considerations. Can you spike out the first implementation of that? And it normally does that just fine. So O1 Pro is for like, hey, here's what's on my mind. Help me figure out where we're going here. Works amazing for that. O1 Mini is for like, hey, how do I do a regex replacement on a JavaScript string? And it's like thinks for half a second and spits out the thing back to me. Yeah, it's great. It's great for that. So that's kind of the O1 family. I'm basically using O1 Mini instead of something like Google or Stack Overflow, specifically for programming questions. I'll copy a piece of code, paste it into O1 Mini and be like, what am I doing wrong here? And it comes back like super duper fast. And then Claude, I think it is 3.5. Claude, that's where I go and I upload a bunch of files and I'm like, I have done, 6 of these. Here's the spec for the 7th one. Write it. Or I'll go paste in an entire PHP class that I've written. And I'll say something like, hey, here's this class. I need you to clean this up. Like I'm doing a couple of things twice. Can you like refactor this for me? And it does like a great refactor and spits it out. And I paste it back in and run the tests and it still works, which means I'm good.
Interesting. So just to paraphrase, Claude, give it kind of examples and ask it to fill in the blanks or repeat something with a new iteration of it. O1 Mini, just kind of asking questions like you would use Google or Stack Overflow. O1
Pro.
Mega Pro. I pay the chump $20 version for both. For like deep thinking, strategic architect is the term I would use, the level kind of stuff. Cool. Okay.
Exactly.
I mean, to me, that's like the whole point of this conversation, right? Is like you as a super experienced developer, how are you using these tools today? And like, because I like to opine about, the world is going to end or not, and we're just going to have universal basic income and not have to work anymore. I think both are very possible. But between now and 18 months from now, when that happens, we need to know how to feed our families. Yeah. No,
it is a 100% selfish pursuit. I want to make sure that my family still has food. And so like maybe we get to Nirvana, we get UBI, everybody's happy, we do whatever we want. But what I do know is that it's going to be a bumpy road to get there if we ever get there. And the people that are able to use the tools are going to have more opportunities than the people that are not able to use the tools. And so I don't know what that's going to look like, but in times of great transition, there's a great like reshuffling, and I want to be shuffled out on top in the end. And so I'm going to learn how to use the tools. I'm going to get way more effective. Is it good for the economy or junior developers? Boy, I don't know, but I have to look out for my family, you know?
Yeah. I don't know. I think junior, to me, like what I told Jesse, like our senior developer on our team, is I said I would hire a U again, and I would hire a person straight out of boot camp. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't hire a mid-level developer anymore. And that's just like, from my perspective, knowing what I know from conversations like this, I think a junior person can probably operate at about a mid-level, but a mid-level can't think like a senior level developer with Cursor or Claude or whatever. Okay, so I want to play What Would Aaron Do? So our last episode, I had Jordan Gall on. He's building Rosie. It's a automated call answering service for home service businesses. The reason I wanted to have him on is like he's building in AI like a wrapper, right? Mm-hmm. So Aaron is building a wrapper product. Okay. What would you do different than 18 or 24 months ago when you're just building a Laravel app, old school style?
Okay, so is the situation I'm building some sort of AI wrapper to offer to the marketplace?
Yep.
Yeah. I think, let's see, what would I do differently than 2 years ago?
Let me give a bit of additional context just for folks who didn't listen to the episode, because I think like what made Jordan's episode and his situation so interesting is the way he put it is like, in the past, you could answer your own phone or have a call service, and now you have a third option, which is AI. And I think that's the thing, is like, I don't want just a freaking like wrapper on ChatGPT to repurpose my podcast episodes. I want like an AI native implementation of a thing that I had to do manually before. So that's and that may or may not be slight, but that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think it would definitely change the universe of possibilities for what types of businesses I would maybe go into or create, right? Because it used to be taking fuzzy or ill-defined user input was very difficult, right? You had to write a lot of tests, a lot of heuristics, maybe a bunch of regex, maybe a bunch of whatever. And it's like, at the end of the day, you're still just kind of hoping that it works. Now you have this very like intelligent thing where you can receive input from a normie and turn it into some sort of structured thing upon which your program can then operate, right? And so I have to imagine Jordan's doing the same thing. So he like gets all the, the voice from the end user, the AI turns it into something a little bit structured. They query the business's calendar and then turn it back into voice for the end user. That just wasn't possible, 2 years ago. You're pushing 2 to hear like when our calendar is open, right? And it's like, we don't have to do that anymore. So it would definitely change the shape of like what I want to offer. It would also be, I think it would also be prudent to have a buffer between like your code and the models, because the models are getting better every single day. Like DeepSeek came out of nowhere. Like, hey, it's 9 in the morning. Oh, the world is different. It's 9:01. And it's like, we didn't see that coming. And so I think having some sort of router or translator, intermediate layer where you can swap out new models is going to be very, very valuable. I would hate to be in the model game. I know they're raising, $500 billion or whatever, but every day some kid is trying to eat your lunch. Where I would want to play is where Jordan is playing, is like, all right, I'm going to harness these megaton companies beating each other to death. And I'm just gonna, great. Y'all have fun. Good luck. I'm just going to use your latest model with zero loyalty to whoever made the latest model. And so I think in in the past maybe 8 to 12 months, the tides have turned on GPT wrappers. It's like, oh, suddenly they're the smart ones. Because then, it's like, and there's no loyalty whatsoever to any models. A new model comes out and everybody cancels Claude, goes back to O1, and vice versa every other week. And so that's probably like, it would be interesting to me if I were like trying to start a business. The heuristic that I would try to do is like, what's super messy and super unstructured and takes a ton of time inside of real businesses. I probably wouldn't go consumer because that just feels like a very hard game to play. But like, so what's messy, what's unstructured inside of a business? What is painful? What is valuable? And what I would do is I would put some sort of interface to that, put an LLM in it, have my code behind that. And then I would like sell that as maybe not even AI enabled. I think that, or like a AI solution. I think that is another thing you could do, is just say like, I will solve the problem for you. It doesn't matter how I do it. Am I using AI? Maybe. Who knows? We'll find out. But I think you could go to a lot of businesses and say, cast upon me all of your unstructured, horrible, PDF bound data, and I will give you something good out on the other side. Yeah. I think that's totally viable. Again, the problem is like, what are the niches? How do you get in there? Who do you know? Are you a plumber? Are you an HVAC person? How do you get into those industries to find those meaty problems? That's the same problem that everybody's had since, the dawn of software, is like, how do I get into these cordoned off industries to find what is painful and fix it? Because that exists everywhere. It's just like, who do you know that knows somebody,
Yeah. I agree. I think like the term AI, I think has already kind of like had a turn, right? Yeah. Like a year ago, if you look at like YC or Tiny Seed or whatever, like everything was AI. I think now, like the name AI probably is showing up less in a lot of products because it's like, duh, like of course, like if you're a new product, you have AI. Even we have like quite a bit of AI going on and are planning for a lot more. So in Reef on the Reforge site, Brian Balfour had a really interesting piece about how users' expectations of software are changing a lot. I'll include a link in the description, but the short version is, we as software providers, we're kind of like helping people take the next step a lot of times. You think about Canva, right? Now it's like, just do it for me, right? Like there's definitely like a whole set of products that are like, don't help me create like an image, just like create the image for me. Right. And but I agree with your like analysis of like unstructured data. I think that like still, if I was going into it, I still would lean on the thing that I think it does really well, which is like take data, synthesize it, and give me something from that. I think like, if you're in our world, like that's like AI show notes and titles and all, like understanding previous, episodes and like coming up with title suggestions or topics or something like that. And we're building all that stuff. But what I wouldn't do is like, automated video editing or something like that. Like it's just like it's that gap, right? It's that gap from like, go build me, Savvy Cal. Like I just don't see it there.
No, what I would not, on that note, what I would not try to do is count on the AI to have good taste. And so like automated video editing, I think is a terrible idea, because in the same way that like creating music requires good taste, creating video requires good taste. And so as the human, I'm going to lean into my human ability to have good taste. And not every human has good taste, but it's something you can learn. But I don't think any AI has good taste, because it's such like an undefinable human thing to be like, this is good and that is bad. Can I explain it? No, not really. I can try, but like, I just know what is good and what is bad. And so like, do I want AI enabled video editing that does certain things? Sure. But I don't want to give like a raw video to the AI and be like, edit this, because I don't think it's going to turn out right. Yeah. I'm fine if a bunch of other people do that, because it makes it easier for me to stand out. Right. And I think that's another thing that like, is going to be pretty important is where is there no human touch and where can you be a human? And I think YouTube is a great avenue for that, because we're seeing lots of like faceless channels pop up that's basically like either stock photos or AI generated photos or AI clips stitched together with an AI voiceover. And it's like, yeah, maybe there's a gold rush there, and it's kind of like drop shipping, and the top 1% can make $1 million and then everybody else makes nothing. But regardless of however that grift is working, I think humans are going to want to connect with humans. And behind the written text, you don't know who you're connecting with, but behind video, you can still connect with a human. And yes, there are AI avatars of real humans. I still don't think those are very good, but I still think video is one of the last. Video and actually podcasts, because it's such a longitudinal format, those are one of the two of the last I'm going to leverage my humanness for an unfair advantage here.
Yeah. Yeah. I told the team this week in our meeting, I was like, it's the most excited I've been about podcasting as a business model in a very long time. Because for a while I was kind of like, gosh, I don't know, like post-COVID and all this, and the number of podcasts are going down and stuff. And now you look at it and you're like, I mean, it's hard for a lot of businesses right now, right? Like blogging and SEO, yes, as a lot of us have tried to do for a very long time. Okay, I won't say dead. Not doing good, right? Yeah. Really, really, really hard, right? Cold email, LinkedIn, yep, all this kind of stuff. All because of the AI enablement. I think just the volume of shit has made the signal noise ratio such that nobody cares, right? And nobody uses it. You mentioned like you don't go to Google anymore. Like my 12-year-old has ChatGPT on his phone, and like it's all he uses. He's like, why would I go to Safari? Like I
think distribution is becoming even more important somehow. Yeah. Like back in 2010, you could, at that time, spin up a Rails app, build a little nothing burger, and end up with, 50K MRR. Those days are just gone, right? Because almost every developer can spin up some app and have something out there. And there are 50 competitors for every single thing, and nobody cares. Nobody cares about your little app. Nobody cares about anything. And so having distribution is becoming ever more important. And I think it's one of those things that you might not know exactly what the outcome is, but it's going to be positive, right? So you can like build up distribution without a definite goal in mind. And as you're working towards building up distribution, you can find what it is you're going to distribute, right? And that is more important now than ever, because there are solutions for everything. But if you have people that know, like, and trust you, you can find the thing along the way. You can try a few different things, and you have like distribution. That's why I think, frankly, it's more important than ever to have a podcast, an email list, a Twitter following, a YouTube following, all of that stuff, because it is getting harder to reach people. And I think those are the last as organic or as inorganic as they are, those are the last like organic ways to reach people, is person to person. Yeah.
Last question. Who do you look to for information about how to use AI better at work?
Yeah, that's a tough question. There are so many grifters and charlatans. There are a few people I follow on Twitter that I think are doing it well. SWYX Swix is one. He's a good guy to follow. And then I think there are other reasonableists that I follow for like just generally good takes. Like Andreas Kling is building a browser called Ladybird. I feel like he always has good takes. Thorsten Ball wrote a few books on programming. I feel like he's a reasonableist. I feel like Taylor Otwell of Laravel hasn't talked about AI hardly at all. But I've always found him to be kind of right down the middle on like trends and tradition. And he just kind of cuts right down the middle on that. And so I try to follow, I don't think I follow anyone just for AI takes. I try to follow like well-rounded, pragmatic, practical senior engineers. and use them kind of as my bellwether for like, what are the reasonableists thinking these days about AI? And every like breathless, oh, warp is going to change your life, I just mute those people, frankly, because I don't want 15 tips to use, Bolt to like start a new SaaS every day. So I kind of just like filter all of my advice through people that I deem as reasonable, and there are many reasonableists, and those are the people that I tend to follow.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I mean, that's the goal for this podcast, right? Like this podcast has had several iterations, but really, yeah, I don't want to be like, and we might even rebrand the podcast at some point, which will be crazy. I don't want to be like an AI influencer, but I just want to be a vehicle for folks who actually know what they're talking about to share a few things to help everybody else out. Like, and I think that's good. I think it's hard, right? Because you have to bring people on who are genuinely helpful and not kind of pushing their own agenda. But sure enough, like we all need as much of this as we can get. I think, to filter the crap and take the good stuff and implement it to like make ourselves better. So,
yeah. I think on that note, something else that is true about the people that I tend to trust on these topics is they are working developers. They're not like primarily YouTubers or influencers or anything. They are working developers. Like they are building towards an end goal. And usually that end goal is some sort of capitalistic pursuit. Those are the people that I think, like if something is able to filter all the way down to them and they're like, my goal is to build and ship product. Turns out it's easier to do with this thing. Then I'm like, great, tell me about that thing. But if your whole business is like, sign up to my newsletter and buy this course on AI, I'm like, I don't know if I can trust you on that. And so that's what I like. Those are the people that I try to follow, is somebody who's building a tool, a product, a company, and they're like, guys, I'm just going faster. I'm like, great, I trust you.
Sorry, super last question. Does it matter if that's a kind of indie maker or they work in a large organization?
Not to me, it doesn't. I have a business partner, but we're solo. It doesn't matter to me if they are indie or work in a big corporation. I think if you work in a big corporation, you probably want to listen to people that also work in a big corporation. But in terms of like discrete productivity improvements, I don't care where you work.
Yeah. I asked just because I think the adoption and perspective on adoption between us and somebody that works at, freaking Pfizer or whatever is quite different. And like their context maybe should be too. I don't know. Yeah. Still very much trying to figure it out. I'll link to in the show notes. I don't have them all in front of me. A couple of folks that I listen to as well, mostly on like just business stuff. And they're all YouTube channels, as you said. So yeah, it's a good place to be bullish. Cool. Aaron,
I have one more charge that I think is incredibly important in the coming age. I have found that tests are 2 to 10 times as valuable as they were before, because before testing was to like offload stuff out of my head. Like I can kind of keep the whole program in my head up to a certain point, but it's better if I like concrete or I like formalize some of these like assumptions I'm making or things I'm holding in my head into tests, right? And then I feel warm and fuzzy when I run the tests, everything passes, and I do something and it breaks something somewhere else. I'm like, oh, thank goodness I have a test, right? I think it's like 10 times more important now because the AI is non-deterministic and it's going to do something different every single time, right? And in terms of like, let's go back to that example where I'm writing all of these AST parsers, these conformers. Sometimes I didn't write a single character in the actual implementation code. And so having a test, or having, in fact, 30 tests that all test this single file, this one class, I've got 30 different test cases. Then I feel super confident when it's like, oh, I need to add one thing to that transformer. I'm just going to copy the whole implementation and go to Claude and say, I need you to augment it such that it does this. And I can take that back and know that the 30 test cases that were passing that I'm super relying on, I can know that those still work. And I wouldn't be able to know that because I don't have enough context to look at the old code and the new code and really see what the behavior difference is, because I didn't write the old code.
Yeah.
I didn't write the old code. I didn't write the new code. And so I'm really relying on the tests that I wrote, and then also the tests that I had Claude write for me. Because what I want to do is I want to say, hey, Claude, here's a class. Write 30 tests for it. And then I can look at all the tests and say, yes, those are correct. Now, forevermore, I know that is going to stay exactly the way that it should. And I can churn that class 50 different times. And as long as the tests pass, I still feel pretty good. Yeah. And so I do think that, like, if the machine is going to write code for you, you better have some way to prove that it's still doing everything it used to be doing, because boy, it will just forget about stuff you told it to do. It'll just forget that, like, hey, when you encounter this, make sure you do this, and then you ask it to do something else. It totally forgets the first thing you asked it to do. And so having those tests, like, that is how you ensure that your software works in the long run.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I wanted to get to QA, but want to respect our time. And yeah, I like it's a thing that we think about a lot, right? It's like, how can we extend like our AI usage to QA? I think it's harder because like the Kelly, the gal on our team that does like most of our QA, like she's thinking like, how can I break this? How can I have this edge case? How can I? And I think that tying maybe it's that architect level thing again. It's like, as we're thinking of these tests and the coverage of these tests, it needs to be somebody with that mindset, which isn't always a developer. Sometimes, if you have QA on your team,
no, it's not. And I think before, so like if you have an existing code base and you're about to like embark on letting Claude rewrite some stuff for you, I think the first thing you do is every time you're about to like rewrite a section or a chunk or a class or a method or whatever, you take it to Claude and say, hey, can you write 10 tests for this method as it exists right now?
Yeah.
And then you commit those tests to your code base, make sure that they pass, and then you're free. Have fun. Like, go muck it all up and make sure the tests still work, and you're kind of ensured that everything is still going to work the way that it used to.
Tab, ship, right?
Tab, test, ship. Yes, exactly.
Love it. Awesome, buddy. Best place for folks to reach out and connect from here? Twitter?
Probably Twitter. Aaron D as in Daniel. Aaron D Francis.
Awesome. I appreciate it, man. Thank you very much.
Yep. Thanks for having me.